Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 4th chapter in the book of Micah. The book of Micah is located in between the books of Jonah and Nahum, which I feel are best approached as two books of the same story. And I've done every chapter on both those books, so you can type in any chapter in either book, prefaced by Corey Johnston in the YouTube search engine for more on that. But this is the first one I've done of Micah, and Micah's name asks a question. It translates as, "Who is like Yah?" And the answer is none of us. None of us are completely like him. He is a perfect being. We are not. Yet there are some of us among us who are closer to him, and these men are called to be prophets. And it's quite a privilege to have intimate access of the direct exposure to the will and revelation of that will of the Almighty. And Micah is one of the written prophets, meaning he has a book which bears his name, and he is classified as a minor prophet, but we have to remember that the classification, it's dated to Latin etymological origins, which stress the quantitative value of the prophets. So the major prophets may have wrote more volume than the minor prophets, but the minor prophets are each in their own way every bit as profound, every bit as beautiful, every bit as meaningful for our present situation in a lot of ways as those of the majors. And Micah's prophetic ministry, it spans the range of 3 kings in ancient Judea. He was a citizen of Judea who offered prophecies about the northern kingdom of Israel, of which and the southern kingdom of Judah, of which we'll read. But his career spans the range of 3 kings, beginning with Jotham in 750 BM before Messiah, and ending with Hezekiah, who died in 686 BM. And a lot happened during those years, most significantly among them the sack of Samaria, which was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel, which was razed to the ground, destroyed, pulverized by Assyrian invaders, who took everyone in it captive and scattered them across their vast empire. So the northern nation of Israel would be nowhere near. And he frankly predicts this as early as the 1st chapter, that Samaria is in for a rude awakening suddenly, and this prophecy was fulfilled in his lifetime. The one we're going to be reading today takes place beyond even our own generation. It is the end time prophecies. So he's one of the Old Testament people who speaks of this future expectation, and the one which beginning in the 6th verse of the chapter we're going to be covering today, the narrative shifts to a prediction of exile by the Babylonians of his native Judea, which would have been at least 100 years of the making. So the prophet is able to foresee their distance is as long as that which Yahweh gives, and we certainly witness a range of the distance in prophetic foresight that Yahweh saw fit to entrust this man. And the opening verse of the 4th chapter reads, "And in the latter days it shall be that the mountain of the house of Yahweh is established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow to it." The mountain of the house of Yahweh was Mount Zion, the physical location which hosted the pride and joy of Jerusalem, which was the Temple of Solomon, and it was the wonder of the Israeli nation, but it was hardly the wonder of the ancient world. It wasn't even included in the 7 ones, but those that did actually outlasted the ancient world, where the temple would be destroyed first in 586 BM, then 70 AD. And as far as I know, the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world which remain standing are the pyramids of Giza. But to return to the text, it would hold the same affection in the Gentile nations' hearts that it did currently with the Jewish people. So every nation on earth will be united in common worship, united in worship towards their common creator. And the Gentiles are, as we're going to read, just flat out love it. And many nations shall come and say, "Come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, and let him teach us his ways, and let us walk in his paths. For out of Zion comes forth the Torah, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. Now the Gentiles in Micah's generation, they didn't have any of this. They did not have the Torah of Moses. They did not have the word of Yahweh. They had no form of special revelation. Prophecy and law were two forms of special revelation which the Israelites had, and the majority of them did not make the most of it. But the Gentiles won't be spiritually spoiled, so they will be embracing the gifts of grace for what they are, and they will earnestly and honestly seek to be taught in his ways and walk in his path, because they will be in awe of the wisdom that is expressed through the temple, and they will have no choice but to obey. They will not be able to resist it because it's so reasonable, and this is the type of reason that man can never independently attain. We can never know better what's best for us and best for others than what Yahweh commands in his ways and paths, which he serves as the designer of and the guider through, and the navigator and everything else. And he shall judge among many people, and reprove strong nations afar off. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall teach battle any more. So this is the geopolitical tensions. There will be none. There will be no geopolitical entities as far as we know in the end times. There will be no need for them, because every human being will be united in common worship and to their common creator. And the judgment of the nations as the individual must come, but those who remain, the strong nations, are naturally more oppressive, at least in the ancient world. So they would be meted out with a harsher judgment. But at this future scenario, the instruments of war will be unnecessary, because war will not be a realistic possibility. So subsumed in harmony and peace will this world be, that the thought or inclination is not even there to raise up swords or point guns at your neighbor. Because who would want to destroy the perfect peace we're living in? So waging peace does take greater effort than waging war. War's the easy way out in diplomacy, as I see it. But the problem is that aggressive people, I'm reminded of the Master's words in Luke 16:8, the children of the world are wiser than the children of the light, and the fact, because they those who wage peace or work towards spiritual betterment are not as shrewd, prudent, or resourceful with the resources that he provides that the worldly do with what the world provides. But it is one day a war will be completely unnecessary and impossible. But each one shall sit under his vine and under his fig tree, with no one to make them afraid, for the mouth of Yahweh of hosts has spoken. So who could argue with that? Sitting in a pleasant, idyllic country scene underneath a vine and a fig tree with nothing to be afraid of. There's no one there that's going to hurt you or harm you, and that is because the mouth of Yahweh of hosts has spoken. Now, Yahweh of hosts is a military name, and a lot of modern people don't like that image. They tend to envision Yahweh as someone who's so peace-oriented that the thought of war is alien to him, or let alone the ability to wage war. But he is the general. Once he rules, once his victory is complete, there will be perfect peace for all eternity. And he's just powerful enough to bring that about, and good enough to do it too. For all the peoples walk, each one in the name of his mighty one. But we walk in the name of Yahweh our Elohim, forever and ever. Now, since the Gentiles are included at the temple scene thus described, making the most of it, loving every minute of it, we can imagine that they at this time, several of them, would have embraced the name of Yahweh and abandoned the name of their idols or mighty ones or gods, which were native to their culture but non-existent, and they will cling to the name of Yahweh and respond accordingly and be rewarded accordingly in proportion to their response. So at this juncture, the narrative assumes a not too distant future prophecy, which is, spoiler alert, the Judean exile to Babylon. In that day, declares Yahweh, I gather the lame, and I bring together the outcast, and those whom I have afflicted. So I misspoke. It's actually after this verse that transition begins. So in that day, that is the final day, the latter day, the end times, he will gather the weak and the vulnerable and the picked on and the sick and those truly in need, gather them together and exalt them to an equal station with everyone else in the kingdom. And I shall make the lame a remnant, and the outcast a strong nation. And Yahweh shall reign over them in Mount Zion, from now on and forever. So he is the great Democrat. He humbles the proud and raises and liberates the slave. So the outcast, a nation of outcasts, will not collectively make a strong nation in any other world but the one that Yahweh has prepared for them. And the lame, there will, I guess, paralysis was a lot more common in the ancient world, but they will be a remnant in the day to come. And he will be on his throne, seated in Mount Zion. That is where the Son will reign and rule, and his rule is eternal. So even though the dynasty of David would disappear some 100 years after this, he was promised in 2 Samuel 7 and 1 Chronicles 17 an eternal throne without end, and that throne is found in the Messiah who sits at the right hand of the heavens and will one day return to earth to rule it for 1,000 years. In you, O tower of the flock, stronghold of the daughter of Zion, it shall come to you, the former rule shall come, the reign of the daughter of Jerusalem. So this is a promise, even though the Gentiles are featured in this ultimate promise is centered on the daughters of Zion, those being the citizens of Jerusalem who came into the temple, and the daughters of Jerusalem. So their sight and center will be the focal point of this glorious new world, even though they will not be the only ones to enjoy it. Now why do you cry aloud? Is there no king in you? Has your counselor perished? For pain has gripped you like a woman in labor. So he's speaking from the present, from the future glorious expectation to the present reality, which is one of pain, and they have a need. They're crying, they're wincing in pain. There's a lack of leadership on the throne, and that would be the case when Zedekiah, who was essentially a puppet monarch, not even of mature age, and and pain came in the form of the Babylonian harassment, which eventually evolved into outright conquest and captivity. Be in pain and deliver, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in labor. For now you are to leave the city, for you shall dwell in the field, and you shall go to Babylon, and there you shall be delivered. There Yahweh shall redeem you from the hands of your enemy. So imagine a woman giving birth is likened to the most painful experience imaginable, but once that birth is given, their joy is, what former pain they were in is instantly evaporated by an overwhelming sensation of joy. This is the concept communicated in John 16:21 in several places throughout the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament. But imagine just giving birth to a child and then having it uprooted and taken from you, or you taken from it. That would be their experience in this not too distant future. Their grandsons, their great-grandsons would essentially experience this. So they were not too far away when they would be brought to Babylon, but even when Yahweh curses, he blesses. So the cursing was for a cause, and that was to redeem them once more, to remind them of where their ancestors had come from in bondage in Egypt. They would find themselves in captivity, subservient to a foreign force, and oppressive one at that, but they will be redeemed from the hands of their enemies by their unfailing ally, who never forsakes them, although when they did forsake him, he did send them away, and rightly so. And now many Gentiles shall be gathered against you, who are saying, let her be defiled, and let our eyes look upon Zion. This was certainly the case of Edom, who we read in the book of Obadiah, who is singularly dedicated to the prophecy of their destruction. They had taken pride, and they had joined the Babylonians in looting and plundering the city of their more or less permanent nemesis, but they would be betrayed by their ally. So even though the host of Gentile nations would be upon them, and they would destroy the sacred temple on Zion, it was useless to them. It was an item to be destroyed rather than to be preserved. That's how little regard they had for the truths of Judaism. But they do not know the thoughts of Yahweh, nor do they understand his counsel, for he has gathered them like sheaves to the threshing floor. So one of the most remarkable things about Yahweh is he can use the tools of Satan as instrument in their wills. Babylon was symbolic and synonymous with the spirit and ethos of worldliness. They were covacious, they were rapacious, they were covacious, they were everything associated with the world and its ways that is estranged from and alienated and an enemy of Yahweh. And they did not seek his counsel. They could not understand it. They did not even know that he had counsel to offer. They were content to remain worshiping their inferior, non-existent deities who pose no existence or power. But they would learn the hard way that being in defiance of his obvious will was invited punishment. They who lived by the sword would die by it, and they would reap what they had sown, and karma hit them. Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I make your horn iron and your hoofs bronze, and you shall beat many people into pieces, and I shall seclude their gain to Yahweh, and their wealth to the master of all the earth. So there's a lot to digest here. One, the recipient, the people who it's directed towards, is the daughter of Zions. These are the ones who are earlier promised to go into exile at the hands of a hated foreigner. But he will make their horns iron and hooves bronze, and you shall beat many people into pieces. They will eventually oppress their oppressors and overcome them. And it's all for the gain, all for the glory, all for the grandeur of Yahweh, and the items of wealth, the worldly treasures, which exchanges from one human hand to another throughout the course of human history, which is a fluctuation of a balance of power where one nation dominates the rest and then their time comes. So everything we claim to own, everything we make really belongs to him, and it will return to its rightful owner, and rightly so. So the Creator will be back in control of what he owns and operates. We are stewards of his creation, and on our human report card, we haven't been doing such a bang-up job on that. So there's a lot of room for improvement in that, in this, or any other age. So that's all the time we have for today. I'm glad you're here. Stay tuned till next time. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.